Good afternoon, folks. How was everybody's Easter? Good, good. Today we got Mr. Little from the Office of Attorney General. He's going to talk about identity theft, scams, crimes against seniors. About 2 years ago, he was here before, so welcome. All yours.
All right, well, thank you. Well, I hope everyone had a joyous holiday just over here over the weekend. Myself, as usual, I ate too much, and then when I woke up this morning, I felt just tired because I just gorged as usual at the holiday dinner. So hopefully you weren't like me in that sense, right? But it is great to be back here again. I was here about 2 years ago, coming up here in this May, and we discussed these issues right here behind me, which we're going to do again. But before I get into that, let me go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Phil Little. I'm a specialist with the Pennsylvania Office of the Attorney General. I have the unique responsibility of traveling throughout half of western Pennsylvania, half being literally geographically Penn State West. And I have the responsibility of representing the chief law enforcement agency here in the Commonwealth. One of the big things that I talk about is this, what we're going to talk about right now. Identity theft, fraud, and scams. These seem to be things that go hand in hand that are not isolated within their own. And one of the biggest targets that we're seeing with these types of things are the senior population. What my mission today is to have you gain more knowledge than what you walked in here with when it comes to these things. You will not be an expert at all of this at the end, and nor would I expect you to. But the goal here is that you're going to pick up some things, these little tips and tricks that literally make the difference between having one social security number taken and not having it taken. And here's the thing. When I talk about these little tips and tricks, none of it is what I call rocket science or this grand scheme of thinking. It's almost when I talk about these ideas and concepts that we need to incorporate in our daily lives, you'll say, that's so simple. Why didn't I think of that? But again, that's what makes the difference between becoming a victim and not becoming a victim. So I just wanted to give you an overview of really what we're going to look at today and unpack. So let's go ahead and get started here. I often answer this question right off the bat. No, that is not a picture of me. People often ask me, is that the guy's ID going over top? No, it is not mine. So let's go ahead and get started, though, here when we talk about identity theft. And the first thing I want to discuss is what it is. What is identity theft? Right? We need to define what that really is before we go any further. And simply what this means is when someone takes our personal information to commit fraud in our name. To give you an example of what I'm talking about here. Ma'am, your name? Ellie. Ellie and I look nothing alike physically, right? But if I'm an identity thief and I get Ellie's social security number, on paper, guess what? I look just like her. Identical, like we're twins. And no one can tell the difference. And that's exactly what identity thieves are trying to do. They're trying to camouflage themselves to look like us on paper through different means, typically for financial gain. Now, you see all these different various ways that identities are taken, and the idea that we're trying to get here is it's through technology, it's through phones, it can be through credit cards. There's many different ways. It can be through the mail system. But we need to be ready for what I call the invasion of the identity snatchers, these people that are coming after us, trying to get our personal information. Now, the thing is, we need to broaden our understanding of what is it they're actually coming after. Many people know the top two things that we don't want in the hands of someone else are typically social security numbers, which is an example of this right here, and some sort of financial number, maybe a credit card number, checking account number, routing number, things of that nature. I have an example of what that may possibly be right here. But the idea is it's actually anything that identifies you and you alone in a group of numbers, a personal identifier. So I talk about something we often overlook that's in a personal identifier. Does anyone recognize what this may be right here? PA driver's license. Now, typically it goes 2 numbers right here, 3 numbers and 4. But here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. I didn't want to steal someone's driver's license number, for example, so we added another digit. But you get the picture. This is something that identifies you and you alone. This number can be looked up when your state police are pulling someone over, looking at records, things of that nature. And it's something that is a personal identifier. Identity thieves have stolen people's driver's license numbers, created fake identification cards with those numbers, and if they were to get pulled over on the records, physically, yes, they were pulled over, but if I stole, sir, your name? You Ed? If I took Ed's driver's license number, Ed's going to get the ticket, not me, right? And I'm not going to pay it. Why would I? I'm not on the hook for it, right? So those things can happen. The last thing I talk about is any type of account number. This could be many different things. Maybe you have an annuities policy, health insurance policy number, which is growing, one of the biggest growing types of identity theft that's out there, medical insurance fraud. Anything that identifies you and you alone, a group of numbers, is something we want to keep safe and secure from others out there. I talk about some numbers and statistics because I believe that the numbers just simply do not lie, and it really helps solidify the issue that we're talking about here. So I wanted to share this little tidbit of information. In 2014, identity fraud was reported by 17.6 million consumers. That's one person every 2 seconds becomes a victim in a year. 86% of identity theft victims experience the fraudulent use of existing account information. So what does that really mean? That means that people that have had their identities taken or had their information, if we say breached, it's typically a professional term, people don't do anything about it. That represents, oh, I'm okay, I'm not going to change my password, it's not that big of a deal. But in reality, they had an issue happen there and didn't really think it was that big of a deal. The number of elderly victims of identity theft increased from 2.1 million in 2012 to over 2.6 million in 2014. As you can see, the numbers are increasing. 45% of all identity theft involved in online transaction. You're going to hear me talk about technology a lot through here because it's not going anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. And like anything else, it can be used for great things, but when used the wrong way, it can be a tool of devastation, and this is no exception. The accounts of utilities and smartphone accounts nearly tripled, so people taking people's information and getting phone plans, getting utilities in one's name. 46% of consumers with breached debit cards are most likely to become a fraud victim. What does this represent again? 46 out of 100% of people that have their credit card numbers breached, 46% of them didn't act upon it, didn't change their PIN numbers, didn't do something with their banking institution to assure that they were okay and that these issues wouldn't arise later in the future. You're going to hear me talk about that and being vigilant in the information that you have and keeping it safe. And if something happens, act quickly. But the thing is, when it comes to identity theft, it really affects everyone around us, not just ourselves. And that scope of the problem really can go globally. It really does affect everyone. When we look at identity theft and we see where the money's going, when we look at it throughout outside of our country, we see that it funds terroristic organizations. So money that's taken from us is then funneled into other terrorist organizations for attacks. When we look at it within our borders, we see that it's tied to organized crime. So either way that we really slice or dice this, it's going to some criminal entity. What we also see is that it hurts the American economy, meaning things cost more. Price of goods will be higher because combating identity theft and fraud. It contributes to stress. One of the things that I unfortunately have to hear throughout my travels is countless stories of people who have had their social security number taken, had their account number taken, and how stressful of a situation it is. I can tell you the recurring theme that I hear from people is more or less that they wouldn't wish that upon their worst enemy, someone that they just totally did not get along with, because it's such a pain. It's something that, quite frankly, can rear its ugly head at any given moment years and years later. And finally, we all pay a higher price for goods because of identity theft. Now, I mentioned that already in hurting the American economy. What I mean by that is, if someone were to take my credit card right now and buy a $500 TV at the electronics outlet just down the street here, well, I'm going to notice that on my credit card report, and I'm going to file a fraudulent charge, and I'll get refunded the $500. Well, the credit card company isn't going to simply, as we say, eat the cost and just be out $500. They're going to go after the electronics outlet that sold that TV to the person who used my fraudulent information, right? My information fraudulently. Well, now the electronics outlet is out $500. They're not going to simply eat the cost, right? How are they going to recoup those monies? By raising the price of goods within their store. So I just gave you one example. Now I'm talking, think about a national chain electronics outlet. Do you think one fraudulent purchase happens in all of their stores across the nation just once in 1 year? No. Thousands upon thousands of fraudulent transactions happen. So when you start to add those up, that becomes costly. And they'll have to raise the price of those goods to offset the cost of those fraudulent transactions. We owe it to each other to keep the price of goods as low as possible for each other when it comes to these issues by protecting our identities. Let's talk about how the three ways our information is obtained. And it happens three different categories is typically how I discuss it. Number one is we talk about carelessness. We aren't aware of our surroundings and the information that we are saying or giving out at times. I have a couple of prime examples of this. One of them involves, I was at a bank waiting to do business, and the person in front of me was also a member of the bank, but he didn't go to that branch normally, right? So he walks up to the teller, and I'm just standing there waiting for the next teller to wait for me. And the bank teller says, "Well, sir, I see that you do have an account, but for security purposes, I've never seen you before. Can you identify yourself by the Social Security number identified on your account?" Which is fine. And at that point, I figure he would write it down and then rip up the piece of paper, maybe whisper it. But no. He said, "Yeah, not a problem. 172598211. Now, if I'm an identity thief, I could hear that plain as day. I could just write that down, right? It's being aware of our surroundings. My neighbor, just last summer, I'll never forget it. I walk my dog very early in the morning, and my neighbor on our street, we have some on-street parking in part of the street. And my dog was sniffing around the tire of my neighbor's car, and I said, "Come on, let's go, let's go." And I looked in the car, and sitting on her seat was her checkbook wide open. Now, I could steal the checking account number and the routing number right off of there if I was a thief. We don't think about our surroundings, but the number one way many people fall victim to the carelessness category is the mail that we get has so much personal identification on it that we don't realize it. And we just do the old rip in half and then throw it in the garbage. Anyone can put two pieces of paper back together and see what it says. If you have access to a shredder, shred your mail. So important, I'm going to say it twice. Shred your mail. Now, I'm not talking about every single piece of paper you get, but think about it. Any bills that you get, bank statements you get, as personal identifiers on there, shred them so that no one else can get a hold of those things, okay? The next thing we're going to talk about here is theft. This is the physical pickpocketing or the purse snatching that we're talking about here. Ladies, for those of you that have purses, please choose a purse that has a long strap. And do not simply just carry it on your shoulder like this. Cross it over your body. Because what's going to happen there is purse snatchers look for someone who's like they're like water, I should say. They go to the path of least resistance. They're much like scammers. You're going to hear me talk about that. If someone has the purse crossed over their body, they just can't simply grab it. like someone that has it over their shoulder like this. Also, many purses now have a flap, right, that you lift up and then you open the middle part, right? Zip the middle part, as I always have to tell my wife and remind her, right? Zip the middle part and keep that flap on the inside of your body, not the outside. Why? Because anyone, if you're in a crowded area, could just walk past you real quick and just lift that flap up. It's on the outside. And lastly, we did have snow today, right? I was just talking about that with Michael before I came in here. It's still a little chilly out. If you wear a coat or a jacket over the purse that you're wearing that is strapped across your body and the public can't see it, you are minimizing your chance of being a victim. Wear that coat over top or wear that jacket over top. Gentlemen, if you carry a wallet in your back pocket, I'd recommend if you have a button that keeps it buttoned, in that back pocket, like my trousers I have on right now or my slacks, I keep it buttoned. Or if you're wearing blue jeans, things of that nature, wear a rubber band around your wallet. That way, if someone were to try to grab your wallet, you would feel that catch on the fabric, right? You'd have that feeling there. It's like a little homemade personal anti-theft device, right? But the biggest thing that we see when it comes to theft and the pickpocketing and the purse snatching is that we as a society carry every single piece of identification on us and every card that we own at all times. What would we do if our purse or wallet were taken within that moment? If you had every credit card you ever owned, every card. Because the number to call is on the back of the card, which is now stolen along with your purse or wallet. We need to get into the habit of only carrying what we need that day. I'm just like anyone else. I have those department store credit cards that other people have, right, or national retailers, but I don't use it every day. I may use it, but once a year. I don't carry it on me. I only carry what I need that day. I carry 2 pieces of identification and my 1 bank card. That's it. Because that's all I need that day. If I need a credit card, I'll bring it with me. I keep everything else in a safe, secret, secure place in my residence. What I also recommend doing is creating a document and keeping that in a safe, secure, secret place that lists every card that you own, the name on the card, the numbers on the card, and on the back of every credit card is a phone number. That way, you do that because in case the inevitable happens, or I shouldn't say the inevitable, but the unimaginable happens of someone's purse or wallet being taken, you're in panic mode in that moment. But guess what? All the thinking has been done for you in that moment. Because now you have a document that you could go home to. You know the number to call. You know how to identify yourself on the card because you have the numbers to get it canceled quickly. So someone cannot rack up charges on that card, right? So those are little pieces of things we often don't think about, but that we really need to start practicing. Only carrying on us what we need for that day or in that moment. And lastly is the trickery or the scams that we're going to unpack here momentarily before I get into a couple other things. But this is the final category. This is the stuff we see on the TV every day, on the news. When you turn on Channel 2 and they tell you the IRS scam or the grandma and grandparents scam, all those different things that we hear about. That's that category right there. But I want to talk about technology real quick and some statistics with it. Not that one. Not that one. This one. This is kind of eye-opening, is that the number of text messages sent and received daily exceeds the total population of the planet. The world texts so much in one day that there are more texts sent and received than there are people on this earth. When it comes to technology, this is the kind of funny and sad at the same time, is that out of the world's estimated 7 billion people, 6 billion have access to mobile phones. Well, only 4.5 billion have access to working toilets. There are more people out there that have access to technology and a very high power of technology than something that we all take as a society for granted. Indoor plumbing and working toilets. Mind-boggling when you think about it. But that's to show you, again, technology is not going anywhere. And as much as we want to push back on it and say, I don't want to use that, I don't want to touch that, I get that. But we need to have a basic understanding if we ever do have to interact with it. And trust me, you will at one point. You can't run away from it all the time. You have to know some of the scams that are out there and how people are using it in a deceptive manner. Okay? So I want to go ahead and talk about a device that has been popping up on the news here lately. And I'm a Ross Township resident. I travel all over the Commonwealth, but I actually live just right down the street here, not too far from here. And this skimming device, how many of you heard of skimmers? Anyone here, show of hands? They were just spotted, a skimming device was just spotted on McKnight Road at a gas station just last week. They had a piece on it. Skimmers come in different forms and fashion, but I want to talk about these real quick. Skimmers are devices that are put on anywhere where there's a card reader. You slide your card in, and you would never know that it's there, and it takes your information off of the back. And scammers then can take that machine off, plug it into their computers, and they have all the information they need to then create a fraudulent card, a physical card, that pulls off of that account or draws down. So I just want to talk about the ATM skimmer here. Anyone here use ATMs? Maybe go to the bank, maybe a Mac machine. Mac machine, I don't even think those are around anymore, but you get the picture. This skimmer right here, this is what the skimmer is, what this hand is holding. It fits over the real part of the ATM right there, and you would never know. You walk up to that machine, you slide your card through, it reads the magnetic strip on the back, and it goes into the machine. But you didn't realize there was two readers on there. Now, you go ahead and enter your PIN number in, and usually with these types of skimmers, there's a fake PIN pad that overlays on top of the real one. You don't realize that if you're not on the ball. But nothing has happened yet, at least to your eye. You get your card back, you get your money, you get your receipt back, and you go about your merry day. At the end of the day, the thief will come back, take those pieces of equipment off, hook it up to his computers, and create a physical card within minutes that now can draw off every single card that went through there. What I recommend doing is, if you're ever going to use an ATM, wiggle the part where you put the card in. You don't have to do it hard, but skimmers will pop off, right? And everyone that I always look behind me when I go to the ATM, and I do that because people always look at me like in the strangest fashion, going, "Why is that guy wiggling that part of the machine?" Well, that's why. And here's the thing. I must have done it thousands of times in my life, wiggling that piece. And they've stayed on there but once. And that's all it takes, is one time. I was once in an ATM in the middle of the state, and I needed to grab some cash. And I walked in the back of this convenience store that had an ATM there and wiggled the part like I've done 1,000 times before, and nothing has ever popped off. But again, it only takes one time. And sure enough, what popped off in my hand when I was holding? A skimmer. That if I wasn't on the ball at that moment, my credit card information was stolen. And to that point, I pulled out my pocket knife and pulled out the blade, and lo and behold, I popped off a fake PIN pad. Handed it to the store owner, who actually had to be there at the time, and said, "You want to call the police immediately. You have an issue, and whoever handles that ATM, you're going to want to contact them because you have this is a fraudulent piece of equipment." Again, I've done it thousands of times, and it takes 3 seconds. But again, I told you those little tips and tricks. That's the difference between someone stealing your credit card information, your bank account information, and not having it stolen. Okay, so wiggle that little piece right there. Takes a second, but it saves you at headaches down the road of potential fraud. So I want to talk about some data breach numbers. Again, I'm talking about information being obtained in those big stores that we hear about. So I just want to rattle off a few of them here. Our biggest one that we saw was eBay having their information online taken, the online auction site. 145 million records were accessed, right, through different means of technology. Home Depot, one of the big top 2 national home improvement stores, 109 million people. Moving down, Target, My wife's number one favorite store. I should own stock there, right? 80 million people, 40 million, I'm sorry, 40 million people had their information taken, right? And we see these things happening over and over and over again. The list goes on and on. But again, we're seeing it happen constantly. So out of those people that had their information taken from those big places, right? Let's see how their information, their card fraud was taken, what type, right? So online transactions, anyone that entered anything online, 45%, the biggest chunk of that pie, involved any online activity. Counterfeit, lost or stolen, second and third, and finally our other. There's various different means, but again, online meaning technology, things being taken through those means. How many of you have this symbol on your card? Anyone here? Anyone here? Okay, I see a few people. This is an RFID type, RFID technology for a card. RFID stands for radio frequency identification. No longer do you have to swipe your card through, but you can wave it over top of the box or the terminal, and it'll send a radio signal to the terminal to complete your transaction. Sounds wonderful, but here's the thing. People don't even have to physically pickpocket you anymore to take your card information. Scammers can buy RFID transmitters that are in those boxes, and if I am close enough to Ed and he has one of these, I don't have to physically touch him. I could be this close to him and say we're standing in line in a busy mall, and it can pick up that signal, and I could get his credit card information. Many cards out there, many stores now sell something called an RFID wallet. They're those sheaths that you put your card in. How many of you have seen them? Usually you can get them maybe at the AARP. They have them for free, different things like that. Now look inside. Typically there's some sort of metallic inside foil, something like that, right? That when it's inside that sleeve, that signal cannot be transmitted. Again, it's a very cheap piece of equipment, that little sleeve, but it's a great investment so that we don't have something like that happening to us. Now, everyone here has been issued a card by now that has this little chip on it, right? Now, it's been over the course of a couple years here, and that technology, while new to us, is not new in general. That has been in Europe for years and years now, okay? We're going to talk about what that really is now. Again, we talked about radio frequency identification, how we wave those cards. So we're going to move on now to we don't need to do NFC, the EMV, the EuroPay chip, right? Many of us have heard of these things, but let's talk about what it really means. The EMV chip is a technology used to create chip card transactions, meaning that the magnetic strip on the back of your card that we usually swipe is the same code constantly, okay, to unlock that transaction. The EMV is different. It creates a unique code for a one-time transaction. It changes every time you shove it in there. So what's the big deal with that? Well, let's say a scammer got your chip number off of one of your transactions. Well, guess what? It's too late because it's already been used and it's deleted and it's already changed again. Whereas if someone got your magnetic information on the back, it's the same number constantly, right? So if you have the ability, shove that card in there. They call it dipping the card. Has anyone seen that? Use that capability. I often hear people complain saying, it takes longer. Well, it may take 3 seconds more, yes. But again, it's an added layer of security so that we don't have those issues. I can remember standing in line last week at a Sheetz, and there was a younger gentleman. I'm a younger guy myself, but he was even younger than me. Shoves his card in the bottom. He must have been in a hurry. And he said, "Oh, this thing takes forever." And I said, well, if you think about it, it really doesn't. This signal has to go to outer space and then back, right? And then go through all these wires. That takes, 5 seconds? That's pretty quick in the grand scheme of things. And you're keeping yourself much safer than just simply sliding through in the back. So again, we talked about the terminal and the card, dipping it in following the prompts on the terminal, because some people still get a little bit confused on how we operate using these machines. So again, we dip the card in the bottom. Following the prompts, it'll proceed for us how to pay, tell us how we go ahead and pay, and then we enter in our PIN number or we sign, things of that nature. So just to give you quickly how all those things work. Now, I want to get into the scams, because that's what a lot of people really want to talk about in here. I often talk about being the silence of the scams, because many people don't talk about it, but it's something that is happening constantly. And we need to be safe from these people, these scammers. So these scams happen many different ways. They happen over the phone, happen through the mail system, they happen through email. Does anyone here use email? Show of hands. Okay, we'll use email then. We will talk about that then. Great. Happens through text messages. Now here's the thing. There are hundreds upon hundreds of scams out there. And on the surface, they may look different, sound different, and feel different. But all the scams follow the same general themes. Here they are. Number one, scams work off of your emotions. Whether emotions of being excited because Ed just won the Jamaican lottery for $5 million. And he's excited, and he's overlooking the fact that for some weird reason they're asking him to wire money there to pay on taxes. Or emotions of being scared because the police just called you, in air quotes, saying your grandson's in jail. You need to bail him out. And if you don't, he's going to rot here in this jail. What are you going to do? They work off of our emotions to get us into a heightened sense. Where we'd normally, if we weren't in that heightened sense, things we normally wouldn't do, such as give up personal information or pay out monies. The second part of scams, there's a sense of urgency. Act now. This deal is only good for as long as we're on the phone. This is the IRS calling. If you do not pay us the money you owe in back taxes within the next 24 hours, we will have the Butler County Sheriff come here and arrest you. Notice that sense of urgency. Why? Because they don't want you to step back and think about what's being presented to you. They just want to work off of your emotions and just react. Okay? And lastly, there's typically money involved or personal information. And when we talk about money, you're going to hear me talking about wiring money constantly. Be cautious of them. Now, the reason I talk about these reoccurring themes is because you may walk out of here and go, well, he didn't talk about the computer scam where a guy calls you and says there's something wrong with your computer. Or he didn't talk about this scam that I saw on the news last week or the scam before that week. Because if I went over every single scam, we would be here till next Easter. You don't want that, and as lovely as this place is, I want to get home to my boys, right? I don't want that. Know that if those red flags and the themes that I talked about with you right there pop up, great chance that those are scams being presented to you. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the most common scams that we see out there. And the first one I want to talk about here is our charitable contribution scam. This typically happens over the phone. Anyone here donate to charities? I do. It's great when you can, right? Well, I'm going to give you different scenarios here and play them out with you. And my good friend Ed up here volunteered before he started. He said, I wanted to be the victim for all of them, Phil. So can you make me be the victim and I'll be the you be the scammer? I said, sure thing, right? So Ed, the good sport he is, he's going to be my victim here for all these scams. Ed's sitting at home the one day, and the phone rings, and Ed has caller ID much like anyone else. And he sees on the caller ID that it says, and I'm just picking this, right? There's nothing wrong with them. It says Cranberry Township Fire Department on the caller ID. And Ed may even know the number, and it's the actual number, right? He picks it up, and I'm on the other line. I say, hello, Ed. This is Chief Smith of the Cranberry Township Fire Department. We're raising money to get new equipment for our firefighters. This new equipment will help keep our heroes, who are firefighters, safe in the line of danger, which will in turn help them to save more lives throughout the community. And I pull on those heartstrings because that sounds like a win-win situation, if you ask me. And Ed thinks to himself, well, my grandson is a firefighter, and I want him to be safe. So I want these guys to be safe. And I say, Ed, that's wonderful. It's easier than ever to give. You don't have to mail in anything. You can give right over the phone. If you just want to go ahead and read off your card number, you can donate as little as $5. Every little bit helps. And Ed thinks, this is great. Sure, I'll go ahead and read the numbers off my card. And because Ed saw on the caller ID that it said Cranberry Township Fire Department, and because he recognized the number and heard me say that I was from there, he believed it. I'm here to tell you this. You cannot trust your caller ID if it's someone you do not know, just them telling you. I trust my caller ID for one number and one number only. And that's when my mother-in-law calls, and I tell my wife, you better answer that thing because I am not. Don't tell my mother-in-law that if you see her. But, that was a bad joke. But, in all seriousness, there's something out there called a spoofing device. Now, don't worry about the name of it. Just understand what its capabilities are. That spoofing device, in the scenario I gave you between Ed and I, it allows me to make the caller ID say whatever I want it to say. I could be in Chicago and call him, and he'd be led to believe I'm here in Cranberry Township. Now, I'm not here to tell you that every single phone call you question what the caller ID says. What I'm here to tell you is this. If it's someone you don't know and is wanting personal information such as money or personal identifiers such as various things that we've talked about, and you don't know who they are, you've never had conversation, don't give that out. Never, ever, this is rule number one with anything, never, ever, ever give out personal information on an incoming phone number or incoming phone call. Now, this is where a gray area gets. I'm going to test you here. We're going to use your PCP doctor, your primary care physician, as an example. How many of you may even know your primary care physician's phone number? We've had them for years. Anyone here just know them real well, right? Okay. Let's say you call them, and you may even recognize the person on the other side of the phone. And you say, hey, I want to talk about something on my medical records, and they'll say, well, Ed, I know it's you, but because of HIPAA purposes, things of that nature, can you just identify yourself by your social? You made the phone call. You know it's them. In that situation, it is okay. But someone calls Ed saying they're from his doctor's office, and they want to talk about a change in his medications or a change in his prescription or a change in his insurance, whatever it is. Now, Ed, we know it's you, but we need to make sure, because we're going to talk about personal information with you. Can you just identify yourself by your social? Should we give it out? No, absolutely not. You have no idea who that is on the other side of the phone. Now, again, take this idea and only applying it to when people are asking for personal information or monies. If your friend, if your old neighbor from 15 years ago found your phone number and calls you and just says, hey, how are you? That may actually be them because they're not asking for any personal information from you, right? So we have to put that really into perspective, okay? Never give out personal information on an incoming phone call. Charitable organizations are one of the most fraudulently used scams because they're one of the three entities that can contact us regardless of being on the do not call list. Now, show of hands real quick. How many of you are on the do not call list? Show of hands. How many of you want to yell at me? You came down here specifically to yell at me and say, it does not work, I'm sick of my phone ringing. I knew you were, right? Huh? I get it. I get it. Everywhere I go, I hear that. But we need to really put some things in perspective here when it comes to the do not call list. Is that there are 3 entities that can contact us regardless of being on that list. There's 4. The 4th one's scammers. They don't care. They're going to call you regardless. The first one are charitable organizations. They can call you regardless of being on that list. The second one is the government vote for me calls you'll probably get in the primary in May and then the general election. They can do it regardless. Now the third one, this is where the gray area begins. Organizations that you have done prior business with in a certain time frame. Now when we think of doing business with someone, we typically think that you gave someone money and you bought a good off of them or they provided some type of service. That's not what doing business with someone actually means. Doing business with someone is as simple as signing up to win this free trip. Sign up to win this free gift card. Sign up to win this free car. Or as simple as sign up for this free Shoppers Club card at the grocery store that you sign up for and you earn money off gallons of gas. Sound familiar to something everyone has, right? And you think about it. When you sign up for those things, it asks for a lot of information off you. It asks for your name, phone number, your address, your email address, your sex, your income in some cases, right? And when we do business with those organizations, they have the right to sell our information off to third parties. We don't realize it. And scammers will pretend to be third-party organizations that pose as real organizations, buy that information and call us. So to wrap that all up, nothing is free except for the pamphlets I have up here for you. Other than that, be cautious. But this card here, the Shoppers Club card, do not go and cancel it. I'm just giving you an example of how we just sign up for things not thinking anything of it. But think about this, to put this all in perspective. How many of you have one of these? When you go into the store, what's the first thing you hand them? This, and they scan it. Guess what happens? They have an itemized list of every single thing you've ever bought in their store since you've ever opened this card. And you know that you scan it every single time you walk through there because you want the savings. Every single item. How many years do you think you've had this? I've had mine for at least 10 to 15. So here's how our shopping habits are catered to the mail that we get. Let's say that every time I go to the store, I buy Kleenex. My family has runny noses all the time, right? I buy a box of Kleenex every time I go to the store. I scan my card. All of a sudden, I start getting coupons in the mail for Kleenex. Do you think it's a coincidence? Absolutely not. Nothing is a coincidence. There's an example, though, of how we signed up for something for free. We did business. Our shopping habits now are sold off to a third party. But in this case, it's good because we're saving money on Kleenex, right? And now the coupons we get in the mail are catered to our shopping habits. Do not go and cancel them. It's just an example to really connect the dots on things. However, if you are on the do not call list and someone contacts you, does not meet those 3 entities, you can file a complaint through our office, which our information is in these pamphlets up here. And we can go after those people. I will be very honest with you, though. A lot of these people are outside of the country. There's nothing we can do in those situations. We have no jurisdiction. The only thing that we can do is educate people like yourselves to not give up money or personal information in those situations, okay? These next ones are going to be pretty quick. I just wanted to set us up there for what we do on the phone and whatnot. The next one here, lottery and sweepstakes scam. One of the biggest, single-handedly the biggest scam that is out there that people fall victim to. Why? because we hang on to that shred of hope that what if this is real? I mean, I know that every neighbor in my community got one of these and it's fake, but what if mine's real? Right? I can't tell you how many people I have met in these situations, and this is what it typically says. Dear Ed, he gets a letter. You are the winner of the Jamaican lottery for $5 million. And the 5 million part's real big, so your eye goes to it. But before we can pay you on your lottery winnings of $5 million, we need you to pay on the taxes. Please wire us $500, and once we get that money to pay on the taxes, we will send you your certified check of $5 million, right? And everywhere I go, people bring these up to me at different speeches that I give talking about this type of activity. A couple things we need to remember is that you never have to pay for lottery winnings or taxes on lottery winnings up front. They take what you owe and then send you the rest. So never do that. Did anyone notice how I asked you to pay? Wire the money. Never, ever, ever wire money to a stranger. If it's someone you know, I get that. There's nothing wrong with wiring service. They're not evil, but when used the wrong way, they are. And here's the reason why people use wiring transfer services. Is because the moment you send that transfer, you can't reverse it. You can't go, can you cancel that? Nope, done. You cannot reverse it. And the people where they can go in anywhere in the world that accepts a wire transfer, get in and get out quickly without being detected. Be cautious of it. Last week, just speaking of these types of ideas where people bring up letters to me saying they've won the lottery, it's the biggest thing I talk about. It's having to play to win. I had an older lady come up to me, and so sweet. She was asking me different questions, and she said, can I ask you a question after you're done? I said, sure. And she brings up this letter to me, and I think it said that she thought it was real because it said, I think, the Tennessee State Lottery for $10,000. She's like, oh, it's not a lot of money, so I don't think it's a scam. And it's not from another country, and it says all the rest, though. Wire the money. We'll give you the payment once we get it. I said, okay, well, you know, it certainly is in the state, and it certainly does say that money. I just have one question for you. I said, what's that? I said, when's the last time you were in Tennessee? She said, I've never been there. I said, how could you win a lottery then if you've never been in the state, let alone been in the state to play and win? But we overlook that biggest part, right? And I've seen places like the Chinese lottery, the New Zealand lottery, the Germany lottery. And people have never been there, but yet they think they've won because we hang on to that shred of hope. If it's too good to be true, you know it as well as I do. It is. Never wire money to a stranger. Family emergency financial assistance scam, or what we like to call it as the grandma-grandpa scam. This happens one of two ways. One is that your grandchild, in air quotes, calls you. And if you're not on the ball with this, they can get you quickly. So again, I'm going to use that as an example. And scammers, you have to understand, they don't know who they're calling sometimes. They're just going through numbers until I hear someone's voice who may sound like they could be a grandparent. I get to Ed. He picks up the phone, and if he's not on the ball, he may give in. He says, hello, and I realize it's a man's voice. I say, Grandpa, it's me, your grandson. Now notice how I didn't say anyone's name. I just said it's your grandson. Now if Ed's really not on the ball here, he's going to think to himself, that does sound like George. George, is that you? Yes, Grandpa, it's me, George. He just told me what his grandson's name was. I had no clue. Grandpa, I'm in trouble. Does this sound familiar? Anyone get a call like this before? Okay. Does this sound familiar, kind of? And there's some sob story where they need money. And we talk about really pulling on the heartstrings. I called you, Grandpa, because you're my favorite grandparent out of all of them. I knew I couldn't go to anyone else because I trust you the most. And whatever you do, don't tell Mom or Dad. Right? Now, does that sound familiar maybe? Again, we've never met, but following around those lines, here's the thing. Giving out your grandchild's name is personal information. Don't do that. If someone calls and says, hey, this is your grandpa or this is your grandson, say, then what's your name? Guess what's going to happen? Click. Because just like water travels the path of least resistance, so do scammers. When we give resistance, when we ask questions, we slow things down, we win. Ask them questions that only they could answer. What's my nickname for you? Oh, come on, Grandpa, you know it's me. No, I don't. Guess what's going to happen? You win. Because they hang up and they go on to the next number who someone's not going to give resistance and just give in. The second way we see this play out is typically the authorities, police, call and say that your grandchild is in jail, you need to bail them out. You need to wire money. But here's the thing, when it comes to wiring money, that's not the only thing they ask sometimes. We're seeing that they ask for different types of payments. So last month, I was holding this seminar and I was talking to a group of people, and they told me, and I've been noticing this, they don't just ask you to wire money, they may ask you to go out and buy, in this gentleman's case, they said they told me to go out and buy $500 worth of Best Buy gift cards and to read the numbers off the back as payment. He said, I thought that was the most bizarre thing I've ever heard. I never paid someone in credit card or gift cards. Anyone that asks you to pay in some strange manner like that, never, ever do. That is a gigantic red flag for a scam happening there. I'm going to move on to our last couple here, make it quick because I want to save time for questions. Credit card and bank account verification scams. Nowadays, credit cards have fraud protection on our cards, right? And scammers know that. They'll pretend to call you, and I'll call Ed saying, this is the credit card company calling. We noticed a suspicious transaction. And they'll say, before we can take it off, the credit card number, the transaction off, can you go ahead and just prove that you are the card holder by reading the numbers on the card? Don't ever do that. You have no idea who that is. Real fraud people, they'll call you, the real fraud department, and they'll just say, hey, we noticed a weird transaction. Was this you? You say yes or no, and they'll say thank you and hang up. No personal information was exchanged. Why? They don't need your credit card numbers. Why? Because they have them. They are the credit card company. But we don't think about those things. We get worked up in the emotions of someone has taken our credit card information. Fraudulent transaction. Do not give personal information on incoming phone calls. Lastly, is our Nigerian 419 scam. This is one of the most bizarre scams that are out there. It happens one of two ways. People ask why it's called this. Well, because it originated out of the country of Nigeria, and 419 there is the criminal code for fraud. One of two ways. One is that some dignitary from a faraway land, you can't make this stuff up, I'm dead serious, a princess from England, a minister of defense from Australia, I mean, you name it, right, contacts you because they know that they can trust you with top secret information. They want you to invest in this offshore account. And if you invest just $500, you will see 100% return on your investment in a month. Now, I knew that I could only contact you, Ed, because you wouldn't tell anyone. I knew I could trust you. Don't tell anyone, because if you do, the investment will dwindle because more people will know about it and try to get in on it. Here's the thing. No princess from Australia is going to randomly give you insider information on a great investment on an offshore account. And we laugh about these things, but this type of scam is what I've seen being people taken for the most amount of money, over 6 figures. The other way that we see this play out is someone contacts you, typically being an attorney, on behalf of one of your long-lost relatives. Ed gets a phone call or a letter in the mail saying, Dear Ed, I'm the attorney representing your long-lost uncle in Russia. And your long-lost relative, by the way, is just uber wealthy, right? And Ed is the beneficiary of his long-lost uncle's estate of $10 million. All we need from you to complete this will and transaction of what he wanted to give to you is just your banking account number so that we can wire that money into your account. Well, here's the thing. If you're anything like my family, you always know where your wealthy relatives are, right? You would have known, so you're more like me than you thought. You would have known about the wealthy uncle who lived in Russia. If it's too good to be true, it is. But we overlook those things, right? So be cautious of that. Just following up real quick with the scams. Never give out personal information. Never provide banking or credit card numbers. Never complete unsolicited surveys or pop-ups. We'll get into that with email. Never donate before you verify the charity. Never trust the caller ID display. Never withdraw cash and wire to a stranger. Never pay for tax or fees from an advance check in hopes of a larger payout. So I just want to go to scams real quick. It's the last thing we'll talk about. Trickery online with email. Something out there called phishing with a P. What this is a scam by email, and the email has a link in it that when you click, it sends you to a website. But the website is spoofed. I've already used that term with the caller ID. This spoofing right here is this is the fraudulent reproduction of a website leading you to think it's real. So I'll put this all together for you. What you are looking at is a spoofed website of the IRS. You get an email that says, this is the IRS. It's easier than ever to give or to pay your taxes online. And you can get an instant, your instant money back. All you have to do is click on this link in the email you get and enter in your information, and here it is. You're sent to this site. And for those of you that know what the IRS's logo is, that's their logo. That's their script. That's their colorway they use. But things are really funny on here. All of a sudden, they start asking for your social security number, your credit card number, your credit card expiration date, your ATM PIN number. What is that? But we didn't think anything of it. End of the day, I didn't mention this before, but I should have. You're not obligated to answer your phone if it's someone you don't know. Whereas you're not obligated to reply to emails or even open emails from people you do not know. Do not click on links inside of emails from people you have no idea who they are. Right? Many people have had their information taken not being on the ball when it comes to these types of things. So if you use email, be cautious of this. Another big one we see is someone contacts you pretending to be the bank, saying that our data has been breached. We need you to click on this link below. And when you do, it looks like the bank's website. And it says, please enter in your username, your old password, and your new password. Thinking when you put the new password in, you're safe and secure. But in reality, it's a fake website where you just gave them your username and password to go into your online banking and wipe you out. Do not click on links from people you do not know, ladies and gentlemen, okay? Lastly, this is the last slide, and we'll do questions. I know it's the third time I said that, but I do mean it this time. Honest to goodness. Get there. Right here, security devices. I talked about keeping things in a safe, secure place, right? Fireproof safe boxes are a great resource. If you're going to use one of them, make sure that you do have it bolted to the ground, right? We often talk about that. Maybe you have a safe. Again, think of a safe, secure place that no one else knows of. If you don't have one of them, create that safe, secure place that no one else knows of, that you keep the credit cards that you don't use every single day there, so we aren't carrying everything on us. Mail, we don't have to worry about here, but again, shredders. I talked about shredders being incredibly important. If you don't have access to a shredder, and this is not an endorsement of any nature of any legislator, it just so happens I know this because I work a lot with our state legislators. Your state senator, so up here, is Elder Vogel, and your state representative, I believe, is Daryl Metcalf, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct? Okay. Oh, he's not your state senator? No, that's national. No, Elder Vogel is your state senator here. Scott Hutchinson is now? Okay. So they hold, regardless of whoever it is, they hold shredding events that are free or very low cost. Typically they're free. And they usually hold them in the spring and the fall. So again, there's a resource. If you don't have access to a shredder, you could use that free service to figure it out. Contact them and they can let you know. So it doesn't matter who our representative or senator is. All we need to know, though, is that those people have those services. We can utilize them for free, okay? So again, my goal was to make sure that we walked out of here with more knowledge than we walked in here. Please use this information to your advantage. And again, while there are a lot of people here, I'm going to guess there's almost 60 people. That's probably not as many people that live here. Share this information with your friends and your neighbors. Because the more that we share this information, the less people that we can potentially have to becoming a victim, not only in our great Commonwealth, but across our nation. So again, thank you so much for coming out. I'll go ahead, and I believe Michael has a microphone. If you want to ask any questions, feel free, and Mike will come on up, and you can ask the question. Looks like we have one over here.
There is a shredder downstairs that's available to all of us.
Oh, there you go. So you have access within your community to a shredder available to everyone. So that's a great service. Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate you sharing that. Yes, Ed.
I just got to ask you a question here. How many of you have been involved in one scam? Four scams. Use your mic. I'm sorry. I'm talking about scams and how many you might have. I have had 4, and one of them was quite disastrous. Just quite. Any other questions?
Cross-cutter shredders. Everybody ought to have a cross-cutter shredder, not just single, because they can be put together.
Yes, ma'am. You are absolutely right. When it comes, there are 2 types of shredders out there.
Yes.
Typically, all of them now are the cross-cut, but I can explain that. There's the old shredders that used to shred in single strips, okay? And there's a cross-cut shredder, which turns it into almost confetti, all right? There have been documentaries out there where they've given a group of middle school students a gallon-sized bag, storage bag of just single strips of a document, and they put it together within a couple minutes, right? So again, if you do have that cross-cut shredder here, which I'm going to guess, Mike, that we probably do, we're good, utilize that, make sure it's cross-cut. But thank you for sharing that information, ma'am.
How do people get your driver's license number?
There's many of different ways those things happen. There's numerous ways. The number one way, though, is that carelessness of leaving our purse layout or our checkbook layout, our wallet layout open in public and not realizing someone that we didn't know came to our residence and may have copied those things down, right? So there's numerous different ways those things can happen. But again, a lot of it's the carelessness, not being aware of our surroundings.
One of the credit bureaus had all our information, about 5 million information, stolen or fished out. And one of them was my credit card number, for which was used by someone in Europe. And the credit card called me and said, "You never went to Europe, and to our knowledge, who is this person who's charging you $500? I said, "I don't know anything about it." And I found out later on that really my credit card number was taken as part of that big scandal that happened to the credit bureau. Mm-hmm. And I had to change all my credit cards from them. And also Pennsylvania give a provision. You can register with a special number that will not allow anybody to take information from the credit bureau about you. And that applies for 2 years. You can renew it, and it costs $10 per credit bureau.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, am I still on? Okay. If you are a victim of a data breach or had personal information taken in that situation, The three major credit bureaus, you can put, even what this gentleman is talking about, even more, you can do a credit freeze. Okay, what that means is, say I took Ed's social security number, and I wanted to open a credit card up on his account. Well, if he has a credit freeze to all the three major bureaus, it won't allow it to go through because it'll red flag up saying, this account's been freezed. Any information used from this gentleman is not allowed to go through. You can turn it on and off through different various mechanisms. But yes, sir, you are absolutely right. When you were talking about the state one, same idea. Great. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that.
When I get a telephone call, I say hello, and they might give some information. I immediately hang up. I do not say any more.
There you go. There you go. How many of you, I guess I should also say this, how many of you get a phone call that says, if you don't want to receive these phone calls, press 1? Anyone ever done that? Don't do that. Just hang up. Because what's happening is there's a robo-dialer calling, more often than not, and it doesn't know if it's calling disconnected lines or lines that are no longer in service. When you hit 1, you have just told that machine that it's an active number. And now that number goes into a bank of numbers that they are going to call more often. Hang up. Yes, ma'am.
I once had my credit card put through some type of skimmer in a waiter's apron pocket when I went to pay for my lunch. And I just wondered if, so therefore, I rarely let my credit card in a restaurant go out of my sight.
Where, mind me asking, where was that at? Is it around here?
Yes.
You don't have to say the store.
Yeah, it was.
So I will say this. You are maybe the third person out of hundreds of thousands of people I've met that has probably happened to. But you're absolutely right. There are skimmers that are handheld that when you pay for a meal, you put your card in that billfold and it walks away. Now it's out of your sight. They'll pull out that skimmer, run it through the little handheld machine, put it back in their pocket, then run it through the restaurant's machine and charge you. Counteract that. Don't let the card go out of your sight. Ask to see the transaction happen physically in front of you. It's one of the rare things that I have seen, so I'm not in shock, but it's probably of everything that's out there, one of them, easily the rarest thing. So that is pretty amazing that I've heard of that. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Those things do exist in that situation. Cash is king, we all know that, but we all carry cards. Make sure that transaction happens in front of you. Thank you for sharing.
While we're getting a mic over there, I have one quick question.
Sure.
There's a new scam telephones. They want you to say the word yes. Have you heard about this?
The "can you hear me now" scam is what it's often known as. So, what's happening is they are recording you. And they're going to ask you typically, "Can you hear me?" And if you're not on the ball, you would say yes. They're recording that, and then they hang up. Now, typically they say, "Can you hear me?" It's anything actually, though, is a yes response. So, we have to be careful. What they're doing, though, is they're recording that yes. They have your credit card information or some sort of bank information, one way, shape, or form. They're making a purchase on your card. They've changed your account information around to call them, actually, if a fraudulent transaction has occurred. They call their phone number and say, "There's been a fraudulent transaction. Did you make this purchase, Ed?" Hit play. Yes. Okay. Just wanted to make sure. That's why if you don't know someone, don't answer the phone. Because that scenario is frightening, right? Anything that warrants a yes response. But it is out there. I am very cautious when people call me. I get it probably once a week now. I've signed up for something where my information was sold off, like I told you. And just last week, someone said, "This is so-and-so from," I forget what it was. "Can you hear me there?" And instead of saying yes, I said, "Go ahead, Mark." "Can you hear me?" "Go ahead." Well, obviously I can if I'm saying go ahead, right? "Sir, can you hear me?" "Go ahead." And then they hung up, right? So, so those things are out there. Yes, sir.
maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I had 2 credit cards, and I was checking the accounts of one, and there was a charge from a travel agency in London, England, for $50-some. And then I checked the other card, and the same identical charge was against my other credit card, too. Well, I straightened it out very quickly, but they got both my credit card numbers somehow from this travel agency in London.
Yeah, again, there are, people always ask, how did that specifically happen? Did they get that? Without knowing every single detail of how those things work, I can't give you how those have happened. There are numerous ways those things are obtained. But yeah, I mean, it is pretty wild. They got both your credit cards and charged them from that same agency. Sure, sure.
When I go to a doctor's office, they always ask for my Social Security number, and I'm never comfortable with that. Is that okay?
Well, if you've already been there, if you've never been there, then yeah, you're going to have to get that for the records. I need that. That's one thing. That's actually why Social Security numbers were created in that sense way back when, and now they've blown it out not proportion, but how they weren't used, they're used for different ways now. Yes, they do need if you've never been there. If you are a reoccurring customer, I guess we call them customers, patient, there we go, ask to identify yourself by your birth date, address, something like that. If they want your social, write it down on a piece of paper. You have that piece of paper at all moments and say, go get the file and compare it to what I wrote down. Then you take that paper and rip it up. Because you don't want to be the guy in the bank who I was behind saying, yeah, my social's 15429, right? So I get that. People often ask that question. But yeah, if you've never been there, they are going to need those to create that file for the records. But moving forward, ask to identify yourself by some other ways or means. Great question. Mike, I think we had a question over here. Yes, sir.
Yeah, robocallers. It seems to be a huge problem, and I know we get a ton of calls that seem to be from robocallers. And I know there have been several attempts made to get the telephone companies to provide some sort of assistance to block those calls, identify them, eliminate them, whatever. And I'm wondering, has any progress been made? And I had a complimentary question to Mike, because we have an in-house phone system. If there might be a piece of equipment we can put on that in-house phone system that would block these robocallers, because it seems like there is some way to identify them.
Well, there is, and then the software and technology changes. Crime is like a cat and mouse game. Mike will go out and buy that blocking device, and there may be one, there may not, to put on the phone system here. And then next month, they changed methods within how they call you, and that device that he bought for the community here is now obsolete, right? Crime and those types of things are like a cat and mouse game, that if they go this way, you start going this way, and they see that you're blocking off, right? And then they go this way now, and then you have to catch up with them. Again, I get that they're annoying. I get them myself. You're not obligated to answer that phone. Be cautious if you do, right? What information you're getting out there. They are working on them, but again, it is that cat and mouse game, and it probably will take quite a while until they're able to really hammer that down. But I appreciate the question. Thank you, sir.
There is another scam coming up now. All of us from April 1st, 2018, between April 1st, 2018 to April 1st, 2019, everyone who has a Social Security number and is using it for Medicare purposes will receive a new card. The scam is people are calling in, you want to expedite receiving your card, I can get it to you in 3 weeks. You have to pay me $50.
Yeah.
That's the new scam coming up.
Yeah, don't do that. They are issuing new cards now because it has been that was a big complaint out here from many seniors on the road, is that my Medicare card, my personal identifiers, my social, I have to carry that on me. It makes me nervous. They're changing that. But with those types of things, those scams, and this is the first time I'm hearing it, doesn't surprise me though, because when big things like that are rolled out, scammers see an opportunity to say, hey, you heard about this in the news somewhere. You aren't completely aware of how it's working. I can feed off of people's ignorance of not knowing how it works, and they'll think it's real because you heard about it. There's some legitimacy to it. Yes, be cautious of those things. Yes, ma'am.
If I freeze my account with Equifax, does that automatically freeze it with the other two?
No. You have to call each individual one or contact each individual one, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, to make sure that those freezes are then put on the other two organizations as well.
Is there anything else we should do if we were contacted about the Equifax thing? You know,
The data breaches, I would follow what the paper's telling you to do in those situations. Continue to still look at your bank statements, your credit card statements. When scammers take something and they take someone's bank information, they don't buy the $500 TV first. They buy the $3 bottle of $3 package of cookies at the store. Why? Because you're going to immediately notice the $500 purchase, but you may think, $3, I don't remember doing that, but maybe I went in and bought something for $3. I don't know. It's $3 anyways. What's the big deal? And they're hoping you do that. And then they do it. They may not use your card information for months until that piece of information has flown out the back of your head and you haven't thought about it anymore. And then wham, $500 purchase, right? So if there's something on there that you don't recognize, contact your bank. Stay vigilant in those processes of seeing what's being purchased on your card. Any other questions I can answer? I believe we have one right here.
What about when you have a phone call, some sweet little lady will say, you bought mustard this morning at the Shop and Save. Did you really do that? And it's like, it's on the other side of this whole issue, that somebody's calling you to warn you that somebody's about to say the TV set.
Are you saying someone's contacting you saying, did you buy something?
Right.
Well, again, that's the credit card scam that we talked about. And if they're asking if you bought it, okay, it's not a big deal until they start asking for personal information. So if they called you and said, did you buy this, did you buy something in this store today? And you say, no, and they hang up, that's not a big deal. It's a big deal. It's not a big deal until they start asking for personal information. So if you didn't buy it, then we'll get it off your account. Can you just provide us your bank account number so we know it's you? Then that's a big deal. Don't give out the personal information in that scenario. I think we have one up here.
This isn't a question. I just wanted to say that a few years ago I received a phone call from my grandson. And I said, which one are you? He says, you know, Grandma. I says, I have 10 grandsons. Which one are you? Couldn't give me an answer. Hung up. A few weeks later, I got the same phone call. I said, don't call her anymore. I said, you're not my grandson. Don't ever call this number again. Mm-hmm. And I've never gotten another one.
Sure. Yeah, again, it's when we show resistance, when we slow things down, it's when we win in those situations. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing.
One last question?
Sure.
Not looking for an endorsement. What about these companies that guarantee your security of accounts? Are they valid? Are they working? What should we worry about those?
Sure. So again, while in my official capacity, I can't endorse things and recommend products, things like that nature. But I will tell you this, that if you buy something like that, do not think it's the say-all, be-all of being safe and secure. The biggest one that everyone remembers is LifeLock. Everyone remembers the commercial, the guy who owned LifeLock. I can't remember his name off the top of my head now, but the commercial basically was, hi, I'm Bob Smith. I own LifeLock. I'm so secure of LifeLock. This is my social security number, 123598988. How many remember that commercial? That was really his social security number. And what they weren't telling you is he had a credit freeze on all of his accounts, and everyone was trying to get his information. You were led to believe, being the consumer, that if Bob Smith got on national TV and told you his social security number, that it's as safe as Fort Knox. It's not true. LifeLock, and any of them, there can be breaches on anything, any of those services. They actually got sued in the state of California for deceptive practices of consumers. We didn't believe they'd be good. What LifeLock actually does is if your data is breached using their services, they'll spend up to $1 million trying to rectify the situation. I've met many people that have had those services. They like them. There's pros and cons to all of them. I would tell you not to just blindly buy something because of an ad. Don't ever do that on anything. Ads are made to advertise and to appeal to you, right? You do your research as a good consumer, right? Look into the things. I mean, think about it. If you can all remember the cigarette ads in magazines and on TV, right? Chesterfields were healthy for you, right? I should just go out and buy them. That's just simply not true. So again, they're there to advertise. I always often say the big print giveth and the small print take awayeth, right? So be cautious in those situations. Do your research like a good consumer. So ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to take any more of your time. I want to thank you so much for coming out today. Stay safe and have a great rest of the year. Thank you so much.
I just want to thank Phil for coming out and talking to the residents, educating you on the different things that are out there. Another avenue you do have is the security department here at Sherwood Oaks. If you have something that is questionable, you can contact us and we'll help you out in any way we can.